Welcome to Season 4, Episode 2 of the Trading Without Borders podcast, mini-series on border issues, informal trade, and non-tariff barriers. Today, we're turning the spotlight on informal cross-border trade, what it is, who drives it, and why it continues to thrive despite the presence of formal trade systems. In particular, we will be looking at the critical role played by women traders who form the backbone of informal trade across Africa's borders. According to the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, most official trade statistics focus only on formal trade, leaving out informal flows. This leads to a major underestimation of intra-African trade, especially between neighboring countries and within the regional economic communities. Much of this trade goes unrecorded, especially nighttime trade in undeclared goods and commodities that aren't captured at designated border posts. The lack of reliable and consistent data has meant that informal trade is often ignored, even though it plays a vital economic role for individuals, communities, and national economies alike. So today we are joined by a distinguished guest who will help us to explore the logistic blind spots that informal cross-border traders face, what it would take to build a more inclusive, responsive cross-border trade system that truly reflects the realities on the ground. Our esteemed guest today is Paulina Abrokwa. Paulina Abrokwa is an international trade and gender expert. She's a professional freight forwarder, licensed customs broker, and the managing director of Trade Links Logistics Limited Company. Paulina is a management member in charge of policy and trade facilitation for the National Cross-Border Women Traders Association, Ghana. She is also an executive of the Ghana Institute of Freight Forwarders and the Secretary of Women's International Trading Association, WISTA Ghana. She's actively involved in training of both businesses and individuals engaged in international trade and is a faculty member of Africa Trade Academy and Ghana Institute of Freight Forwarders Academy. Paulina is a trade facilitation champion and has impacted over 1,000 women business, both on formal and informal cross-border trade. She is currently a consultant on a project for an intervention for women, youth, and persons with disability along the Lagos Abidjan corridor, which is a collaboration between Trademark Africa and the Africa Trade Academy. It is therefore a great honor to have Paulina join the podcast, share insight from the perspective of a stakeholder within the informal trade space. Thank you so much, Paulina, for agreeing to join me today.
Thank you, Omo. It's a pleasure to be here. And thanks for the good work you are doing. Africa appreciates it.
Oh, thank you so much, Paulina. So before we go in, Paulina is going to say hello to us in our local language in Ghana. So Paulina, over to you. Let's say hello to our audience and our listeners.
Okay, so I'll speak in the Ghanaian popular language called Chi. It's by some people of southern Ghana. So, hello, Ghana for program baso. Enti mpacho obia, enti michia obia. What I just said is that, hello, Ghanaians, there's this program that we are doing. And so make sure you are paying attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Paulina, for that. So I hope there are Ghanaians and other Africans, at least she has told us what the meaning is. So make sure you're all paying attention to what we are doing. So now that the introductions are over, I'm moving on to today's discussions. So Paulina, in a publication titled Addressing the Trade Facilitation Challenge in the Context of the AFCFTA Views from West Africa, it was noted that informal, small-scale women traders carry out a large share of cross-border trade. While some operate through associations or cooperatives, many still lack access to the knowledge, tools, or organizational structures needed to scale or formalize their operations. This informality not only complicates borders data collection, but also means their activities are often underreported or misunderstood. From your perspective, what roles do informal traders, especially women and youth, actually play in sustaining regional supply chains across Africa? And why do you think their contributions tend to be overlooked or undervalued in mainstream logistics and policy discussions?
That is a very loaded question, but I like it. But before I delve or to answer the question, I just like to give a brief background of the cross-border women because today I'm speaking as a cross-border woman. And
That's
so
fine.
I'll
That's
do a
fine.
lot of the formal speeches and all that from a practitioner's point of view, what are feelings and all that. Now, someone said on LinkedIn that in Europe and the West, informal connotes illegal, but in Africa, it means cultural. And I can agree with that to a great extent. And even in your introduction, you mentioned the fact that some of these trade or informal trade tends not to be recorded and the rest. That's true, but that is because of its cultural nature. Just look at this scenario. I mean, some of the world's trade is not recorded, if I can put it that way. Assuming you're out of Africa, you go to Europe or America, and then you buy stuff. You buy stuff either to give to your family as gifts, or maybe some of them you can buy in a bit of quantity that you sell. But normally it becomes part of your luggage, a traveling luggage, for which reason you are not, obliged to declare them and even pay anything for it. So that is a kind of trade that is not recorded. In the same way, when it comes to the cross-border trade, that aspect, we also have people who crosses the border just to give something to their family, visit their families, or take things to their family, right? And we also have people who also cross the border to just go and buy and come and prepare food. So they go to the market across border and just buy things to prepare. So ordinarily, these things will not be something that they would have to declare for custom purposes, and it is not wrong. It is very much within the international movements and protocols, if you like. So the cross-border trader is someone who will be buying either goods for sale or crossing to go and sell, or even crossing to go and buy in various quantities, all right? And then we cross-border women traders, we are involved in fast-moving consumer goods, manufactured products. We are into textiles, cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, plastics, food, vegetables, grains, so you can name it. And normally we are either selling to colleague traders, or we are selling to consumers. Some of us also even hawk. So we are on the borders, we have our wares on our head that we are hawking for people, bystanders and even travelers or border officials to buy. So that's the nature of it, right? So we play very crucial role. So that's a bit of background as to how we apply our trade and the kind of trade we are involved in. And then also, it is also important to distinguish, between border residents and then non-border residents, because that also plays a role in normally the volume of trade that goes on. So for example, if someone lives within the border or the ranges of what the International Migration Organization will call a border resident, if you are within 7 kilometers radius around the border, then you are deemed to be a border resident. Anybody living beyond that is a non-border resident. And you realize that the farther you go, the more the distance. So assuming I'm a cross-border trader and I'm not a border resident, the volume of goods I will buy will be more than somebody who have the opportunity to be crossing every day because the distance is shorter. And so it plays a role as to how some of the trade gets recorded and others do not, because some of them, the quantities are like the ones that you can ideally talk about, maybe a passenger's luggage, for which reason they didn't have to go through any formal customs procedures. Right. Now, to your question about what role we play, which is very crucial. We are crucial in sustaining regional supply chains. We also provide market access, right? So sometimes, you know, there's seasonality of goods. So sometimes, let's say Ghana and Ghana and Togo, the Aflao on the Aflao border. Sometimes you have a certain farm produce being abundant or in season in one of the sites of the borders. And so when it happens like that, those that are not in season for that product will have to cross and go and buy because it's cheaper there. And by that, they are providing market access to the other side that have the abundance or they have the harvest of it. So instead of it going waste, you have us crossing to go and buy and bring it to our side because it is not in season and vice versa. So the traffic is a two-way traffic depending on the seasonality. And that also ensures food security. And then we also facilitate regional integration by facilitating the movement of goods across borders. So that is kind of a liquid flow of goods. That's what we are looking at with the ECOWAS trade liberalization scheme, with ECOWAS itself, and then with even the African Continental Free Trade Area. We have been, as cross-border traders, we have really lived these things. And by that, we can really say that integration is very, very possible, right? And then also, by all these things, we also help to sustain livelihoods through our trading activities. So that's a bit about us and then the role that we play.
Thank you very much, Paulina. That was really enlightening. You know, the way you dimension the different categories of cross-border traders, and also speaking about the sort of trade and how you trade, and distinguishing between border residents and non-border residents, and how you facilitate regional integration, and also providing market access when you have to cross to the other side in terms of whether, for instance, seasonal goods. Thank you very much for really breaking that down for us. I'll move on to the next question. So when we talk about trade barriers, we often think of tariffs or official regulations. But for informal traders, the real issues can be border delays, transport bottlenecks, lack of storage, complex documentation, or even interactions with custom officers. In your experience, which of these barriers create the biggest obstacles for informal traders, particularly women and youth? And how do they typically work around these challenges? Are there informal systems or networks they rely on to keep their goods moving?
Right. So, in no particular order, I'll say the lack of the requisite infrastructure is really the headline for me. Because, and again, I'll go back to the airport example. If you are going through the airport, you realize that there's concentration, there's canalization, you know where you have to pass, and you can't just wander around.
Absolutely.
And then you have channels to go through, you have body scanners. So already the infrastructure is of cultures you in a way. You can't say, oh, in my village, this is how I walk. When we are walking, we walk this way. So even though there are signages or there's a channel to go through, you would want to go otherwise. You are cultured automatically. So assuming that we have some of these things like scanners, body scanners, cargo scanners, and the rest, then it limits the officer's suspicion that a cross-border trader or a passenger will be hiding some things, because once your consignment, your cargo go through the scanner, then every doubt is removed, at least on the surface level, especially if the scanner says, declares you as normal, not having any contraband. It saves time, right? And so infrastructure is important. And then even for the non-border residents, who sometimes have to spend time or days or hours on the borders. And sometimes there are, in fact, not sometimes, washrooms is a problem, where to even pass the nights. We are forced to pass the night in the open and all that. But assuming we have this infrastructure, it reduces the time you even have to spend at the border. So infrastructure is important. Then the human attitude. we realize that in Africa, or let me take ECOWAS, we have a lot of agreements, or even the ECOWAS agreement or the protocols, the trade liberalization scheme and the rest are things that are to facilitate our trade. But you realize that some of the officers, they appear to turn a blind eye to these agreements and how their protocols are supposed to work. And then they demand money for goods that they are not supposed to demand anything that even the ETLS says is free. Sometimes you have a lot of issues with duplicative functions or roles of border officials, something that ordinarily they can do together, even if each of them must inspect, they can do it jointly. Sometimes you have to go to this person, then you go to this person, and it's quite frustrating. So the human attitude is something that I can put the second. Then, of course, again, their attitude, border officials, blatant disregard for the bilateral and regional trade agreements that we have. And then also, again, on the infrastructure, the absence of signages. If you are a first-time a person who is crossing the border, you may not really find it easy because you can pass somewhere and there's a shout, hey, hey. Meanwhile, there's nothing to show you're not supposed to pass there. So you unlike in a situation of airport where you can confidently go because there are signages all around, you know your way around easily, you can easily find your way. On most of the borders, it's not like that. And then also the transportation. Transportation is, I mean, looking at the roads and everything, it doesn't really help trade. So that is also another bottleneck. And of course, what you mentioned, the lack of cold storage and cold chain. So instead of maybe, assuming we had warehouse facilities at the border, we can just bring the goods and even get it transported from there. But because of the lack of that, those non-border residents have to travel from far to come, make sure they cross, go and buy the goods and come back and spend the night on the road, and it's not really good. So the lack of storage and cold chain facility is also a big problem. And how do we work around this? You know, the human being is a survivor. And I don't know whether you know this about the survival of the fittest, where there's even the story about the fact that some people became white in my sociology lessons or history. Some of us are black or dark, others are white because of migration. So those who migrated to the West, like in Europe, because of the weather, they became like fair. And those of us who remain, because of the sun and the rest, we remain dark. If you take our nose structure as Africans, we tend to have flatter nose than our colleagues in the West, because you see, according to, I mean, what I learned by my sociology and my history, because of the cold, so as the wind, they need, the wind travels through their nostrils. So it has to go a bit, like their nose have to be long so that at least by the time it gets into them, it's been warmed because of the distance, right? So in the same way, human beings will always find our level. So in spite of the changes, in spite of all the frustrations that we go through, we try to find our way. So it is sad to say that most times we have to succumb to paying, because if you don't pay, you either not be allowed to go or you'll be delayed so much. But you know that every trader is about your turnaround time. It's your turnaround time. So if you have to be delayed for 5 hours because you won't pay bribe, ordinarily a human being will say, okay, then let me pay and go, which is not good. Right. And then also one of the ways is it has brought in what we call the carriers, like middlemen. You know, some of the traders, especially the non-border residents, because of all the issues, the bad roads, the poor infrastructure, the harassment and all, they have decided not to travel themselves again to buy. So maybe they will travel once. They will travel once to just negotiate their goods, get a supplier, and that will be it. The rest of the business would have to be, done via communication, and then later the carriers or these middlemen will cross the goods. So it has introduced the middlemen who sometimes ill-advise the traders, because for them, it's not about using the right means or the right procedures, but is about crossing anyways. So even if they have to drive their way through and all that, it happens. So now when it comes to non-border residents, you don't really have a lot of women crossing like that because of the hazards of crossing to trade. But especially in Ghana, what is helping is the simplified trade regime, which is a very official means where there's simplification of the documents and the processes, which makes it easier. So a trader gets to the border with their consignments, they deal with customs officers who calculate the duties, and the document required for those is very minimal. Very, very many. Even if you don't have an invoice or any such formal document, your consignment will still be processed, and then you pay the requisite duty, which is really helping. Except that by the time this came, somewhere 2021, we had a lot of people who had already decided not to cross because of all the challenges. But regardless of even this simplified trade regime, the issue about the inadequate border infrastructure and still the extortion of officers is still quite rampant. But at least the simplified trade regime is very much helping. So that's how we go about our trade, in spite of all the challenges that we've enumerated.
Okay, thank you so much for really breaking it down. I really like the way you emphasized and you dimensioned each challenges from the lack of requisite infrastructure, the fact that we have no body scanners, infrastructure, and examples that you gave, that infrastructure at the airports already cultures you to just obey automatically or just walk along the way the structure is at the airports. And if we have those ones at the borders, it might also help out. And of course, issues of human attitude that needs to be addressed as well. Cold chain and lack storage facilities, the lack out, that is also a challenge as well. And the fact that some of the traders have had to resort to the use of middlemen, but with challenges with that, and simplified trade regime, the minimal documentation, and how that has been helping out. Thank you so much, Paulina. That was really helpful. And yes, so we will move to the next question now. So can you share a story or example that illustrates how current border or logistics systems are failing informal traders? You already gave us some anyway with the airport example, but we'll still maybe you can also share more. So, what did the experience reveal about the gaps in the system? More broadly, how do these logistic challenges like delays, harassment, or lack of infrastructure impact traders' profits, personal safety, or their ability to scale their businesses? I believe that you already spoke to this in question two, so maybe you may just go a little bit deeper for us in this time around. Thank you.
Right. So just to take you along our journey. So then just come with me. Imagine having to spend over 5 hours or more at a place without a washroom. Imagine having to pass the night in the open without any accommodation, something you ordinarily not do, but for trade. Imagine having to necessarily rely on an illegal person or a person who does not really know their way, like the blind leading the blind kind of, to find your way, or simply being dealt with for using the wrong routes because there were no signages. Right. And for gaps, it's a question. I'll ask a question. I'll say, if border officials can be compromised or are willing to offer themselves to be compromised by extortion, then what is it? Because if the gatekeeper, because most times we are unwilling to give anything. We don't want to, because we know that what we are carrying per ECOWAS protocols, we don't have to pay anything. Some of the goods are even not eligible to be recorded. Like it's like a passenger's luggage kind of. It's not up to the value of the $200 that warrants payment or any formal processes. And yet, in our insistence, we are punished and we are delayed. So that's the gap, because if you, the gatekeeper, if somebody is even want to do the right thing, but you are still insisting for them to give something, you are willing to be compromised, then that is a huge gap. And then Another major gap is who is involved, the treatment of those who are known to be involved in informal cross-border trade, i.e. women and youth. These are a group of people or persons that should not be treated in ways like this, like having to let a woman stand for long hours to punish her for refusal to give a bribe or something. It's a huge gap for me, because these people that are like in society can be termed as vulnerable must not be allowed to go through this. Most especially those who have decided to do legitimate business and ensure that all of us or our ecosystem is functioning to contribute their quota to society, and also work to earn a living for themselves and their families. So I think that these are huge gaps for me. Right. And then concerning how these affect us, I'm sure I heard right. It was part of your question, right, Omo?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
How does it
So of
affect
course,
your,
it's
in terms of how does it impact your profit, personal safety, the ability to scale your businesses?
so mostly it keeps the cycle of poverty because our earnings are reduced. According to a study, then trade facilitation West Africa study, cross-border women traders earn like $90 or less a month, in spite of the hassle, because there's a lot of demand on you to give money. And when you come, you want to put that on your wares to sell. And if you happen to be more expensive than your neighbor, it means that you have all the people going to them. So definitely it impacts our profit. And then it leads to what? Low earnings. And then it also denies that of lack of opportunity to scale up. First of all, the informal cross-border traders, like you're at the bottom and you don't really have a lot of capacity building. But for recently with the protocol on women and youth in trade, that we have a lot of development partners bringing sensitization programs and all. The cross-border woman trader is just left to be on her own, without information, without a lot of things. And this does not help to scale up their businesses. And of course, if the trade is informal, then of course the structure of the business is also informal. And so mostly in the financial systems, if you don't have a formal business or your business is not formalized, you don't stand a chance to get access to finance. So that is a barrier. But again, with the simplified trade regime, at least, which ensures that you have a TIN, or anybody who is processing their documents has a tax identification number, that kind of helps a bit. But it still does not take away the problem. So lack of opportunities to scale. And like I mentioned, it entrenches the cycle of poverty because the earnings are low from all the challenges. People are not able to have a good turnaround time because of the so much delays, the lack of infrastructure, and the rest. And of course, those who also attempt to use the unapproved routes because of the delays and the frustration at the main route, fall victims to robberies. And that also impacts their personal safety. And even how the wares are packaged, because sometimes some of the goods you need a cold storage, something, a proper cold storage container or something to keep the goods. And then in the absence of that, you have to use improvise a container, and it compromises the integrity of whatever product it is. Imagine a fresh fish that you have to put it in a very something that is temperature sensitive oriented, and it's being displayed or put in something that cannot keep its integrity. And at the end of the day, it comes to the market, and then public safety can be compromised that way, because especially at Aflawe, again, you have a lot of people crossing to sell in either the Aflawe market or the Kodovia Copper market in Togo. So I mean, those who patronize these things, aside the health or the safety of the trader, the one who is her customer, who consumes these wares, also stands a chance of having their health compromised. So the issue is quite big. And once we don't structure our border infrastructures well, these things will go on and sicknesses will be the order of the day, God forbid.
Yeah, I say God forbid to that as well. Thank you so much for highlighting those issues. The next question. The AFCFTA Women and Youth in Trade Protocol aims to ensure that women and youth are not just participants, but key beneficiaries of regional trade, driving inclusive growth and structural transformation across Africa. What would a more inclusive logistics and border ecosystem look like for informal cross-border traders, especially women and youth? What kind of infrastructure? I think you've emphasized a lot on infrastructure today. Or so, what sort of policies or support systems would need to be in place to make that a reality?
The first one I'll mention is border officials with the right attitude and orientation. I've participated in a lot of trainings for cross-border women traders, capacity building. I've been a facilitator in these. And mostly the question is, now that we know this, how about the border officials? Because for them, they should know better. They have the benefits of literacy. They have the benefit of capacity building of all the regional and bilateral agreement and their implementation. In fact, they are the implementers. So if they are forcing you to do the wrong things, what happens? So if our border official had just a percentage of the right attitude, you know, if I'm a cross-border woman trader or I'm a cross-border trader and I am always in the habit of carrying illegal goods and I'm always arrested, first of all, I may not, after the second attempt, try again because of what happened to me the first time, or other people will not be encouraged to do that. But once you give the impression that people can pay their way through, or even when they're in the right and you insist on collecting from them, the next time they will know that it's not about whether you are right or wrong, but it's just about paying your way through. And that spreads across and it becomes entrenched and it becomes the norm at the borders. So people don't really care about doing the right things by just paying their way through. So for me, if we had border officials with the right attitude and the right orientation, it will go a long way for an inclusive border ecosystem. And I've always said in a lot of platforms that the officers that are posted to the border officials, they have to give them a certain orientation. They have to give them a special orientation. If you are, let's say, at the airport or you're at the seaport and you are being transferred to a border, you have to be given the right orientation. Sometimes some of these people are transferred out of punishment. Maybe they were in the wrong, and then just to punish them, they were put at the border. So already in their mind is punishment, and they are not mostly friendly. So if we have the people with the right, border officials with the right attitude and right orientation, to go a long way. The second thing for a more inclusive border ecosystem is, again, the simplified trade regime. By that, I mean a simplified documentation processing, right? And also to go with that will be a joint border post. So once you have a simplified documentation and processing system in place, it must go hand in hand with a joint border post so that if you get to a border, what you do at one side of the border, it is not repeated at the other side, but that because of a joint border post that the officials of both countries are at the same place doing the same inspection at the same time, then your time is reduced. So simplification of processes plus a well-functioning joint border post, not the one that in name exists, but on the grounds, the officers don't really see eye to eye from either side. And so the same duplicative functions repeat itself. No, but a functioning one, joint border posts. Then a border with adequate infrastructure, including well-functioning amenities, so toilets, directional signs, officers who know how to do the right things or does the right things, and then accommodation facilities. If especially non-border informal traders are crossing or have to trade, because they are the ones who normally have to spend time or hours at the borders, right? So if there are accommodation facilities provided so that in case you are not able to finish your processing, you can spend the night, it's better than having to forcefully travel by nights. And then, of course, a smart border infrastructure, like body scanners and cargo scanners. And of course, a border with good access routes will be more inclusive.
Thank you so much,
And then
Paulina.
again,
Okay.
just to add one more thing, a border that also has a PA system in that gives information in the local language, because trade information keeps changing. Sometimes the policy directive will come and then it will change how a process is, you're supposed to go through a process or even a route to use. But if I get there, I don't know. It's only the border officials who know. And then everything, something I've been doing that was so right initially. Now, because of the new directive, it's wrong. And then I have to be arrested or I have to pay fines because of that. It is not the best. So if a border, as part of the infrastructure, if there are PA systems that are speaking in the local languages, because most of these borders are traditional communities, to update traders on changes in policies and what to do next, it will really go a long way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paulina. Thank you for being so practical and sharing all of these challenges. And because it's really very important, just like you had mentioned, if you are doing capacity building, the women are being trained and the border officials, there's really, you need to also reorient them. They need to be trained as well, because if you are training the women and they are then getting to the border post and the officials are then behaving contrary, then you just wonder, so why are we then getting trained? So I think it's very important for policymakers to take note of all of these challenges and ways that they can support our cross-border traders. And another question I'm going to ask as well is, let's look at private sector this time around, how they can support. So how can the private sector, especially logistics and fintech, how can they play a more active role in supporting informal cross-border traders? Are there practical ways they can design products or services that meet the unique needs of women and youth traders who operate outside the formal systems?
Okay, so for example, from the logistics side, we can provide reliable courier services with tracking system, right? So that instead of relying on third parties, illegal third parties, then a reliable courier service company can consolidate these goods and cross with it. So it means that to ensure that all the documents, the goods and everything is right. And then the trader in the comfort of wherever, especially the non-border traders can track their goods whilst they are, they are in transit, okay? But then again, these things, we can be motivated. For me, as let's say a logistics service provider, we can do these when we have the commitment or the right policy from government. So assuming, for example, we have very good road networks, and we don't really have a lot of frustration from officers, because sometimes after crossing the border, as you go down into the towns, you realize that there are a lot of checkpoints. And if I'm a transport operator or a courier service operator, I rather reroute my truck or my van into routes that are more accessible, that I can have faster turnaround time. Unlike where I will be stopped multiple times with multiple demands on a certain route. So if we have the commitment of governments, right, and countries or those who have entered into trade agreements, wants to enforce the tenets of those agreements, then private sector will also bring our innovation to bear to make these things work so well. So we can even pre-finance some of these traders, because come to think of it, some of their the value of the goods they trade are not so much, they are not so expensive that we can't pre-finance. But the thing is that you yourself, you are likely to incur more costs by providing that service. So it boils down to policy, the commitment of our government to provide trade facilitation facilities, and then we can also jump on as private sector to offer these services. So again, I'll go back to the simplified trade regime, which has come to help so much because it has helped in a bit to bring a bit of formalization into the trade. Assuming we have some banks to also provide a certain platform for payment, it will help. But another good thing that is happening in Ghana is the platform that is being developed, which is called the non-tariff barrier review and reporting platform, where traders can really report in real time the challenges they are facing, irrespective of which part of the border they are. And then these complaints will be taken by the people who must take them up and then immediately get people to assist them. So that is what is helping. But again, when this happens or when the platform is in place, again, we will rely on the commitment of those in authority to ensure that if a cross-border trader is being unfairly treated and they make the desperate call, their reports will be taken seriously, and then aid will come to them. Once this happens, then they are more encouraged to always report, and of course, by themselves, do the right things, because if you're going to report somebody and you're in the wrong, you can't really get anything. So then it will also put us in check so that we do the right thing, so that when we do the right things and the officers want us to do the wrong thing by giving or anything like that, then we know that will not work. So gradually, both as the traders and the officials will be cultured, again, let me use that word, with a very responsive non-tariff barrier reporting and review platform.
Hey, thank you so much for that. My final question is just going to be, do you have additional recommendations, like concrete steps that all the policymakers that constitute policymakers within the African corridor, cross-border space, from regional economic communities or AFCFT institutions, amongst others, how can they support informal cross-border traders, especially women and youths? So just give us some recommendations on reforms or interventions that will make the biggest difference in closing the current gaps in infrastructure, access, or protection.
My charge to Africa will be this, that Africa must learn to put her money where her mouth is. That we should not just always wait for development partners to ensure that some of these trade agreement works. So developing the infrastructure is really key. It will help in reducing the time and cost of trade. It will help in the movement of people across board. And when people are able to move so much, trade happens. I always cite the example. When China, became the hub, let's say hub of trade, if I can put it that way, we have traders going to China to buy, to import, to bring, right? It didn't take them like seminars and all that to know Africa-China trade, like the way we have a lot of seminars and workshops on African continental free trade area trading and all that, because the infrastructures are in place. It's cheaper for you, it's cheaper in terms of freight for a consignment outbound Africa than intra-Africa. So if you are shipping, let's say you are using the sea to ship a consignment, you are likely to have a lower freight when it's outside of Africa than when it is within Africa, because of what? We don't really trade among ourselves so well. My point with that is this, that once we have the access routes, it's easier to go and come it means that we can better trade among ourselves. So whatever we have to put in place to ensure that we ease movement intra-Africa, trade will naturally flow. So we should develop that ourselves. We have the money, we can do it. We don't always have to rely on partners, donor partners, and the rest, even though their support can go a long way. So Africa must learn to put her money where her mouth is. And then my second charge is that state parties must take serious exceptions to border officials who blatantly violate the protocols of bilateral and multilateral trade agreements. We sign treaties, we sign agreements, and then traders have the capacity, they know all the rules because there's a lot of capacity building for traders sometimes, especially with new laws or new protocols like this. After everybody's excited about it, we are doing sensitization and the rest, and then you get to the border and say, which one is this one? Is it this one that we'll eat? It's like they make nonsense, excuse my word, of the protocols. So state parties, when these get to them, they should take serious exceptions to these officials and ensure that it doesn't continue. And then again, there has to be interconnectivity between border systems, So for example, custom systems should be able to talk among itself or within itself. So let's say if you take Elubu and Nuwe, okay, between Ghana and then Cote d'Ivoire, the customs system must be able to talk to each other so that most of the function will not be duplicative. Or when a cargo begins, the process of a cargo begins here, by the time it gets to the other side, the information is already there. It has already been transmitted. That allows ease of movement and then facilitation. And then, of course, we must make conscious effort to empower small-scale cross-border traders in ways like access to finance, letting them know about what they must do, which a lot of, for example, my association, the National Cross-Border Women Traders Association, are doing with the help of a lot of development partners. So it's something that should continue to empower cross-border women traders and to also help them towards formalize their businesses, not by going through the lengthy process of, let's say, a limited liability, no, but giving them, just like the simplified trade regime will have when it comes to company registration, there should be procedures like that to register basic information so that they can also cope, they'll be empowered, they can be formalized, and then by that they can grow. And again, the border infrastructure, we should have smart border infrastructure that upholds human dignity, especially of traders and users. Because some of the borders, when you get there, it's like they don't think it's human beings that use it, right? But human dignity has to be upheld in every situation. So border infrastructure that upholds human dignity, that is smart, that reduces time. And of course, finally, I'll reiterate this point that we should have orientation and special training for border officials so that their attitudes and behavior will align, because the attitude you, as a border official, if you're at an airport or a seaport, the terrain will be different at a border, for which reason you must come down to that level of those traders, and then they can also be empowered. Sometimes, to us, some of the border officials, they are too intimidating. Imagine a cross-border woman trader who is not literate. Okay, the fact that you are in uniform, you are in an office with air condition is even intimidating in itself. So, but your attitude should be able to calm them down, to be able to explain situations if you find that they are not really on top of the processes they want to do, then you come down to that level. So that's what I mean by orientation and special training for border officials. That'd be quite different from if they were posted to a seaport or a land port.
Thank you very much, Paulina. So there we have it. She has said it. Let's put our money where our mouth is, Africa. It is not just enough to be doing sensitization programs, workshops. Let's bring it down to reality, on the ground experiences. Paulina, they are the ones having to experience all of this, and she has brought their experiences to us. She has shared what the challenges are. So I think it's now time for all of us, the stakeholders, government officials, the policymakers. She has also emphasized on the issue of reorientation of border officials and has given examples of that, how they can train them or how they can build their capacity in their interactions with the cross-border women traders, and also the need for interconnectivity between our border systems. Yes, we are talking about the African Continental Free Trade Area, but we must build the capacity of our officials to know. We must be able to work to support each other, to integrate our borders for a successful African Continental Free Trade Area. So thank you so much, Paulina, for joining us today and sharing your thoughts with us. It was really practical. Like, I also learned a lot. It opened me up to quite a number of things that the cross-border traders are having to experience across borders. And it is now time for us to just sort of realign, also look for ways to support initiatives that will support the cross-border traders. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. And we would also like to say a very big thank you to our listeners who have tuned in to listen. Please share amongst your friends, colleagues, even policymakers, because that's the essence of this podcast. Let's see. Yes, we are trying to get Africa to trade more with each other, but let's also be highlighting the challenges that may hinder a successful implementation. So, and on this note, I'm going to say thank you all for listening in, and until the next episode. Yeah, for the next two episodes, we're also bringing somebody who is in the logistics space, and we're also getting a policymaker to also come and share. Paulina is also in the logistics space, but today she wore the cap of the cross-border traders. So we'll bring in a logistics expert as well to also come and share. Then we'll have a policymaker from as well, who will also share in another episode. And until the next one, I say to you all, bye-bye.